city never truly slept.
Even in the late hours of the night, traffic lights flickered, neon signs hummed, and the endless tide of people moving through the streets gave the impression of a heart that never stopped beating.
Inside one of the tallest glass towers downtown, a man named Yousuf Khan was still at work. At only 32, Yousuf had carved out his name as a CEO feared by rivals and respected by allies. His empire stretched across multiple industries: technology, finance, and real estate. People called him ruthless, brilliant, and cold. He wore his navy suits like armor, his perfectly styled hair never out of place, and his phone always in his hand. But what people didn't know was that Yousuf's life was as empty as the skyscraper hallways at night. He had no family waiting for him at home, no one to message him a simple good night. Work filled every gap, and success was his only companion. That night, as he sat in his penthouse office overlooking the glittering skyline, his phone buzzed with a message. He didn't recognize the number. The text read, "I don't know what else to do. The baby won't stop crying and the hospital bills are piling up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have texted you." "Wrong number, maybe." Yousuf frowned, his sharp brows knitting together. "Baby? Hospital bills?" He almost ignored it. Spam, most likely. But something about the desperation in those few lines pulled at him. For a reason he couldn't explain, he typed back, "Who is this?" Across the city, in a tiny apartment with cracked walls and flickering lights, Kinza stared at her phone in shock. She hadn't meant to send that message to a stranger. She had been trying to reach her cousin, asking for help after another long, exhausting day. But in her tiredness, she had pressed the wrong contact. Her baby, barely 6 months old, was burning with fever. She had rushed him to the hospital earlier, but without insurance or steady income, the bills were suffocating. Kinza worked as a part-time waitress, scraping together just enough for rent and food, but the medical costs were beyond her reach. Alone, scared and exhausted, she had broken down and sent that accidental message. When the reply came, she panicked. Should she explain? Should she apologize? Her fingers trembled as she typed back, "Sorry, wrong number." Please ignore this, but Yousuf didn't ignore it. Something in his gut told him there was more to the story. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the message. Wrong number or not, there was a real person behind those words. And a baby. For the first time in years, Yousuf didn't dive back into work. Instead, he found himself staring at the city lights, wondering who this mysterious woman was and why fate had dropped her desperate message into his life. The first connection. The next morning, Kinza was at the hospital again. Her baby boy, Ibrahim, lay in a crib with wires attached to his tiny body. His fragile breaths broke her heart. She whispered prayers, clutching his little hand. Her phone buzzed. The same unknown number. "Is the baby okay?" Her eyes widened. Why would this stranger care? She bit her lip, torn between ignoring it and responding. Finally, she typed back cautiously, "He's sick, but he'll be okay, inshallah. Please don't worry. You don't even know me." But Yousuf wasn't satisfied. He wanted answers. He didn't understand why, but he felt a strange responsibility. Maybe it was because he'd grown up without a mother, abandoned at a young age, raised in boarding schools where love was foreign. Maybe the thought of a child suffering with no one to help struck too close to home. He replied again, "Sometimes strangers care more than the people you know." "If you need help, just say it." Kinza stared at the words. Who was this man? Why was he insisting? She wanted to tell him everything. That she had been left by Ibrahim's father before the child was even born. That she had no family nearby. That she worked endless shifts only to fall behind. But pride held her back. She had made it this far without begging. She wouldn't start now. Instead, she only replied, "Thank you. But I'll manage." Yet even as she typed it, tears rolled down her cheeks. The hospital call by noon. Yousuf was in a meeting with investors when his phone rang. Normally, he never allowed interruptions, but something made him step outside and answer. "Is this Mr. Yousuf Khan?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is from City General Hospital. You're listed as an emergency contact for baby Ibrahim." Yousuf froze. "What?" The nurse repeated, "You're listed here as the emergency contact. The baby had complications. We need you to confirm if you're on your way." For the first time in his life, Yousuf was speechless. "Emergency contact? He had never even met this baby. His mind raced, piecing it together. Kinza, the text. Somehow, maybe in desperation, she had written down his number. I'll be there, he heard himself say. Moments later, Yousuf was in his black car, racing through traffic. His assistant tried to call him, but he ignored everything. The hospital loomed ahead, sterile and intimidating. He walked in, his tall figure in a dark suit immediately drawing eyes. Nurses whispered as he strode past, his expression unreadable. His phone clenched in his hand, and then he saw her. Kinza sat on a hard plastic chair, clutching her baby's blanket, her face pale from exhaustion. She looked up, startled, when Yousuf approached. Their eyes met, the powerful CEO and the struggling mother, connected by nothing but a wrong text and a twist of fate. You, she whispered, standing quickly. What are you doing here? You listed me as the emergency contact, he replied, his voice deep, steady. So tell me, Kinza, what's going on with your baby? Tension and truth, the moment hung heavy. Kinza's lips trembled. She wanted to deny it, to tell him it was a mistake, but the truth pressed too hard against her chest. I had no one else, she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't know what to do. They asked for someone to call, and I panicked. I'm sorry, Yousuf studied her. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with tired eyes that had seen too much hardship. She wasn't dressed fancy, just a simple shirt and jeans, but her dignity was unmistakable. He could have walked away. He could have said it wasn't his problem. But instead, Yousuf sat beside her. Tell me about him, he said, nodding toward the crib where Ibrahim lay. Kinza hesitated, then slowly explained everything. The absent father, the endless bills, the double shifts at the diner, the fear that one day she wouldn't have enough to save her child. As he listened, Yousuf felt something shift inside him. For years, his life had been numbers, deals, and power. But here, in this sterile hospital, was something raw, real, and human. Don't worry about the bills, he said finally, his voice leaving no room for argument. I'll take care of them. Kinza's eyes widened. What? No, I can't accept. You don't have a choice, he interrupted firmly. Your baby needs care. That's what matters. For the first time, Kinza saw something in his eyes. Not arrogance, not coldness, but a hidden pain, a loneliness that mirrored her own. And though she barely knew him, though he was a stranger who had stepped out of nowhere, she felt a strange flicker of trust, the beginning of something unexpected. As hours passed, the baby's condition stabilized. The doctors reassured Kinza that Ibrahim would recover with proper treatment. Relief washed over her, though fear still lingered about what tomorrow would bring. Yousuf didn't leave. He stayed by her side, silently observing, occasionally asking questions. Kinza didn't understand why. CEOs didn't waste their time in hospitals with strangers, yet he seemed anchored there, as if leaving wasn't an option. When evening fell, Yousuf finally stood. I'll send someone to handle the payments. Don't argue, he added when she opened her mouth. Kinza looked up at him, her voice soft. Why are you doing this? He paused, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, because once, a long time ago, I wished someone had done the same for me, and with that, he walked away, leaving Kinza staring after him, her heart heavy with gratitude and confusion. She didn't know it yet, but that single wrong text had set in motion a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Kinza woke up in the stiff hospital chair. Her neck ached, her back throbbed, but the first thing she did was glance at Ibrahim. Relief washed through her when she saw him breathing calmly. His fever reduced, but there was something else that startled her. On the small hospital table beside the crib sat a tray of food, warm bread, tea, fruit. And next to it, a neat stack of hospital papers stamped paid in full. Her heart skipped. Only one person could have done this. Before she could process it, the sound of polished shoes echoed down the corridor. Kinza looked up to see Yousuf Khan, the CEO she barely knew, striding toward her. He wore another expensive suit, perfectly tailored, his phone in one hand. But his eyes, dark, sharp, and restless, fixed on her first, then on the baby. He looks better, Yousuf said, his voice calm but carrying authority. Kinza stood quickly. You shouldn't have paid. I told you not to argue, he cut her off. His tone was firm but not unkind. Your son's health isn't negotiable. Kinza's lips trembled. Gratitude swelled in her chest, but so did unease. She didn't like owing anyone, especially not a powerful stranger whose world was so different from hers. Why are you here? She whispered. Yousuf hesitated. It was a question he had been asking himself since last night. Why was he here? Why hadn't he walked away after settling the bills, after making sure the baby was safe? He could have, but something about the small, fragile boy fighting for breath, and the woman with tired eyes who refused to give up. It had struck him harder than any business deal ever had. I don't know, Yousuf admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Maybe because I don't want to leave. A clash of worlds. Kinza wasn't sure how to respond. No one had ever stood by her side without wanting something in return. She studied Yousuf, searching for hidden motives. But all she saw was a man carrying invisible scars. Still, she couldn't let herself get too close. You don't belong here, she said quietly. This is my problem, not yours. You're a CEO. You have a whole empire to run. Why bother with us? Yousuf's jaw tightened. Because power means nothing if you can't use it to change someone's life. His eyes softened. And right now yours needs changing. Kinza shook her head. You can't just walk into people's lives and fix everything with money. Some wounds, some struggles, are more than that. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then unexpectedly, Yousuf smiled faintly. Maybe, but let me try. An unlikely bond over. The next 2 days, Yousuf kept returning to the hospital. At first, Kinza resisted his presence, but Ibrahim seemed to brighten whenever Yousuf leaned over the crib, speaking softly in his deep voice. The baby would clutch Yousuf's finger, refusing to let go. Watching that, something stirred inside Yousuf he had never felt before. A strange warmth, a sense of belonging. One evening, as the city lights flickered outside the hospital window, Kinza finally asked, "Do you have children?" Yousuf's expression darkened. "No," he paused, his gaze distant. "And I never thought I wanted any. Then why do you care so much about Ibrahim?" Yousuf was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Because when I was a boy, sick and alone, I wished someone would care about me." Kinza's breath caught. She didn't press for details, but she felt the raw truth in his words. For the first time, she saw past the expensive suit, past the CEO title, and glimpsed the lonely man underneath. And slowly, against her will, she began to trust him. The whisper of gossip, but not everyone understood. Nurses whispered whenever Yousuf appeared, his commanding presence impossible to ignore. Why would a billionaire CEO spend his nights in a children's ward? Who was this woman with him? The whispers reached Kinza's ears, filling her with embarrassment. She didn't want to be the subject of gossip. Didn't want people to think she was some gold digger chasing a rich man's favor. One afternoon, she confronted Yousuf. "People are talking. They think you and I—" She trailed off, her cheeks burning. Yousuf looked at her calmly. "Let them talk. Their opinions don't matter." "They matter to me," she shot back. "I don't want anyone thinking I'm using you." His gaze softened. "Kinza, you didn't ask me for anything. I came here by choice. Remember that." Her chest tightened. He was right. Still, her pride, her fear of dependence, gnawed at her. "I don't know why you're doing this," she whispered. "Maybe," Yousuf said, his voice low, "because this baby isn't the only one who needs saving." The promise that night. As Ibrahim slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Yousuf stood by the crib, watching. His large hand gently adjusted the blanket over the child. Kinza sat nearby, exhaustion etched on her face. She studied him, this powerful man who seemed so out of place in her world yet somehow belonged here more than anyone else. Finally, she asked, "When this is over, when Ibrahim gets better, will you just disappear?" Yousuf turned to her, his eyes intense. "No, not if you don't want me to." Something unspoken passed between them. A fragile promise, a connection neither of them had expected, but both felt deeply. And as the night deepened, Kinza realized that the wrong text she had sent might not have been wrong at all. Maybe, just maybe, it had been destiny. The days that followed felt almost unreal to Kinza. For the first time since Ibrahim's birth, she wasn't facing everything alone. Yousuf kept showing up, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just sitting quietly by her side, always checking on the baby with a tenderness that surprised even the nurses. But Kinza's heart wasn't at ease. She knew life didn't hand out miracles for free. And Yousuf Khan, powerful, intimidating, and mysterious, was no ordinary man. One evening after Ibrahim's final checkup, the doctor confirmed that the baby's condition had stabilized. Kinza nearly collapsed with relief. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched Ibrahim to her chest. Yousuf stood nearby, watching silently. There was a flicker of pride in his eyes, as if he'd fought the battle alongside her. And in a way, he had. But when they left the hospital that night, a black car pulled up. Two men in suits stepped out, bowing slightly to Yousuf. "Sir, your board meeting," one of them began. "Cancel it," Yousuf said flatly. The man hesitated. "But sir, the investors," "I said cancel it." Yousuf's tone cut through the night air. Kinza stood frozen, clutching Ibrahim. She had known he was wealthy, but the way those men treated him, the way the world seemed to bend around his authority, reminded her just how different he was. She whispered, "Who are you really?" Yousuf glanced at her, his expression unreadable. A man who doesn't want to walk away. The past, that haunts later, when Ibrahim was finally asleep in Kinza's small apartment. She offered Yousuf a cup of tea. He accepted, though it looked almost absurd, this billionaire CEO sitting awkwardly on her worn-out sofa, holding a chipped mug. For a while, they sat in silence. Finally, Kinza asked softly, "Why did you say you wished someone had cared for you as a boy?" The question seemed to strike something deep. Yousuf's hand tightened around the mug. His eyes, usually sharp and steady, clouded. "My father died when I was 6, he said at last. My mother left soon after. I was sent to a boarding school, expensive, prestigious, but cold, empty. No one held my hand when I was sick. No one sat by my bed when I had fevers. I learned to survive alone." Kinza's heart ached. She had guessed there were shadows in his past, but hearing it made her chest tighten. "Is that why you built all this?" she asked gently. "The company, the empire?" He gave a faint, bitter smile. "Maybe. Power became my shield. Money became my voice. But sometimes," his gaze flicked to Ibrahim's crib, "sometimes, I wonder if it was all just to hide the boy who never stopped waiting for someone to show up." Kinza swallowed hard. In that moment, Yousuf wasn't the intimidating CEO. He was just a man carrying scars that no amount of wealth could erase. A glimpse of normal. The following weekend, Yousuf did something unexpected. "Let me take you both out," he said. "Somewhere away from hospitals and worries." Kinza hesitated. "Out like where?" "You'll see." A few hours later, his sleek black car pulled up outside a quiet park. It was a world away from the sterile white walls and fluorescent lights they had grown used to. Birds sang, children laughed, and the sun painted the grass gold. Kinza laid a blanket down, placing Ibrahim gently upon it. The baby squealed with delight at the open air, kicking his tiny legs. Kinza laughed, a sound so rare, so pure, that Yousuf found himself staring. "You should laugh more often," he said quietly. She flushed. "Life doesn't give me much reason." "Maybe it will now," he replied, his tone almost like a vow. For hours, they simply existed together, feeding the baby, sharing stories, watching the sun dip low. It felt like a glimpse of something neither of them had known before. Family, whispers of doubt, but happiness has a way of drawing shadows. That evening, as Yousuf dropped them back at her apartment, Kinza noticed a sleek car parked nearby. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, dressed in designer clothes. Her sharp eyes narrowed as she spotted them. "Yousuf?" The woman's voice was sharp, demanding. Kinza froze. Ibrahim stirred in her arms. Yousuf's jaw tightened. "Aisha, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same." The woman's gaze flicked to Kinza, then to the baby. "This is why you've been ignoring meetings? For this?" Kinza's face burned. She didn't know who this woman was. An investor? A colleague? Someone closer? But the way she spoke, the way she looked at Kinza, made her feel small, like she didn't belong. Yousuf's voice hardened. "This is none of your business," Aisha smirked. "Oh, it will be. The board won't stay silent when they find out their CEO is distracted." With that, she swept back into her car and drove away, leaving a heavy silence behind. Kinza clutched Ibrahim tighter. "She's right, isn't she? I'm a distraction. You don't need this, me, my problems, my baby. You have a whole empire waiting for you." Yousuf turned to her, his eyes fierce. "Kinza, listen to me. You are not a distraction. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm living, not just surviving. Don't push me away." But Kinza's heart wavered. Could she really let him into her world? Could a man like Yousuf Khan truly belong in the fragile life she had built? The storm brewing that night, long after Yousuf left, Kinza sat awake by the crib, staring at her sleeping son. She wanted to believe Yousuf's words. She wanted to trust him, but life had taught her that good things rarely lasted. And somewhere deep down, she knew the story wasn't over. Yousuf's world, power, wealth, enemies, was colliding with hers, and sooner or later the collision would demand a price. Still, as she looked at Ibrahim's peaceful face, she whispered to herself, "If destiny brought him here, maybe it's for a reason." What she didn't know was that destiny was just beginning its test. The following week was a blur of emotions. Kinza tried to settle back into her routine, work, caring for Ibrahim, stretching every rupee, but nothing felt the same. Yousuf had stepped into her world like a storm, and now nothing fit where it used to. He called often, sometimes late at night after long meetings, just to ask how Ibrahim was doing. Sometimes he showed up unexpectedly, carrying groceries, baby clothes, or simply himself. Each time, Kinza's heart pulled in two directions, gratitude and fear. She knew she was starting to depend on him, and that terrified her. The board's threat. Meanwhile, in Yousuf's world, whispers had turned into storms. The board of his company, powerful men and women who had backed his rise, were uneasy. At an emergency meeting, one of them slammed the table. "Yousuf, your judgment is compromised. You've missed meetings, postponed deals worth millions, and all for what? For a woman and her child? This isn't the man we invested in." Another leaned forward, eyes cold. "If you continue down this path, we'll call for a vote." "You could lose your position as CEO." Yousuf sat silently, his jaw clenched. He had built this empire brick by brick, with sleepless nights and ruthless determination. And yet, as he thought of Kinza and Ibrahim, he realized something. Power suddenly didn't feel as valuable as it once did. Still, he said only one thing before walking out. "Do what you must." "I won't abandon them." The breaking point when Kinza heard about the board's anger, thanks to gossip that spread even into her workplace. She was shaken. "You could lose everything because of me," she said when Yousuf came by that evening. She stood in her tiny kitchen, her voice breaking. "Your empire, your position, your name. It's not worth it. I won't let you sacrifice that for us." Yousuf stepped closer, his eyes burning with intensity. "Kinza, listen to me. I've spent my whole life chasing power, and all it gave me was loneliness. For the first time, I found something real. You, Ibrahim, that's worth more than any empire." Her chest tightened, tears welling in her eyes. "But I'm scared," she whispered. "People like you don't stay. And people like me, we're not meant for fairy tales." He gently took her hand, his voice soft but steady. "Then let's write a new story. One that doesn't care about what the world says." The crisis. Just when hope began to bloom, life struck again. One stormy night, Ibrahim suddenly began to wheeze, his tiny chest rising and falling too fast. Panic surged through Kinza. She rushed him to the hospital, rain soaking her clothes. The doctors whisked him away, machines beeping frantically. Kinza collapsed into a chair, trembling. And then, like a shadow turning into light, Yousuf appeared, soaked from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, breathless. He sat beside her, his hand covering hers. For hours they waited together, fear hanging heavy in the air. Finally, the doctor returned with a tired smile. "He's stable now. He'll need monitoring, but he'll be okay. Relief crashed over Kinza. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Yousuf wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. For once, she didn't resist. In that moment, she realized she didn't want to push him away anymore. She needed him. Ibrahim needed him. The decision days later, Yousuf stood before the board again. The room was tense, the decision looming. One of the members sneered. "Well, Khan, do you choose your empire or your distraction?" Yousuf's reply was calm but unshakable. "I choose what matters. If that costs me the title, so be it." The room fell silent. For the first time, the board saw a man they couldn't control. Later that night, Yousuf drove to Kinza's apartment. She opened the door, surprised to see him without his usual polished calm. "He looked free. They gave me a choice," he said simply. "And I chose you." Kinza's breath caught.
"You… what?"
"I don't care about the title. I care about you. About Ibrahim. About us." His voice softened. "Kinza, I don't know what the future holds, but I want to be there. Every step. If you'll let me," tears filled her eyes. For so long she had lived in fear. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of losing everything. But looking at him now, she saw something stronger than fear. Truth. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Stay." A new beginning weeks turned into months. Ibrahim grew stronger, his laughter filling the small apartment. Yousuf was there for every milestone. First smiles, first giggles, first steps. The sight of the powerful CEO crawling on the floor with a baby made Kinza laugh until her sides hurt, and slowly, carefully, their bond deepened into something more than gratitude, more than friendship. It became love, quiet, steadfast, undeniable. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Yousuf held Ibrahim in his arms while Kinza watched from the doorway. The baby tugged at his tie, giggling. Yousuf looked up, meeting her eyes, and in that simple glance, she saw everything: commitment, belonging, and a promise of forever. A wrong text had brought them together. A hospital call had sealed their fates, and against every odd, two broken worlds had collided to create something whole. Kinza stepped forward, resting her hand gently on Yousuf's arm. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.